The Arabian Racehorse Podcast with Debbie Burt and Gary Capel.
Welcome to another edition of the Arabian Racing Podcast. This week we're going to be reviewing the Royal Cavalry of Oman's 0 to 75 handicap, which was run over 1.5 miles at Wolverhampton. It's been good to renew the relationship with the Royal Cavalry of Oman. They've been sponsoring with us for over 10 years now. They sponsor from the grassroots right up to group level races with races such as the Royal Cavalry of Oman Clarendon Stakes, which is a Group 3 run at Newbury. And interesting, I thought, to find that the winner of this race, Al Tabari, his dam actually won a 0 to 75 handicap over the same distance, sponsored by the Royal Cavalry back in 2013. That was ARH Cossack. So it just goes to show the length and breadth of support that the cavalry has given Arabian racing in this country. We said in the preview of the race last week that it was a bit of a mixed bag, and it looked that way as the race panned out, didn't it, Gary?
Yeah, it was quite an odd race to watch at various stages, really. For whatever reason, not many of them seemed to travel particularly kindly. I don't know if it was windy, very windy down at the track at Wolverhampton that day or not, but lots of them were sort of rolling around a little bit. And I thought full credit to Howard Chang, who rode the winner. Obviously, he's been riding this horse the last couple of runs and completely different tactics. So I believe that the jockey decided to utilise those tactics and dropped Al Tabari right out. Was the last horse off the bridle, came with a strong, steady run, but was noted travelling quite well, leaving the back straight, and just about found enough to get the better of Kayak by a length and a half. And they came a long way clear of anything else. But nice to see two of the homebred Arabians, if you like. Al Tabari, obviously. We know all about his dam, ARH Cossack, who you've mentioned. Used to run in those royal blue, not the Sheikh Hamdan royal blue silks, but royal blue silks with an orange cap, and she was a fantastic race mare, and she's obviously produced this Al Tabari. And I say full credit to the rider Howard Chang, who I thought gave the horse a fantastic ride, and had the foresight to change the tactics. Peter Hammersley decided to let him do so, and it worked wonders.
Absolutely, Gary. And I think, as you say, a little bit disappointing from some of the others in behind, but then, as we'd observed beforehand, a lot were in first-time blinkers, lots were stepping up in trip, and the race did sort of fall apart a bit at the end. But as you say, all credit to Al Tabari and Kayak. They came well clear of the others, and they made the most of the opportunity. Yeah,
very much so. A little bit of Kayak, I mean, he's 6, but it's almost like a little bit like his sire. It's going to take sort of a long time for the penny to drop. It certainly did do last season, but it looks as though it's beginning to do so now, doesn't it? Which is good for Jen Harris. I'm sure they'll find a race for this horse, and it looks all about stamina, because he looked like he was going to fall out the back, drop away, didn't he, once he was headed? But he kept on finding, not quite as much as the winner, admittedly, but he did keep on finding. And like I say, the front pair came a long way clear from Jinan, who didn't really have any excuses. Yes, okay, perhaps didn't get the clearest of runs at the top of their home straight, but to be honest, I don't think was ever likely to catch the front pair. And in turn, Jinan was well clear of the remainder.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Gary. And if we now move on to our next race, which will be the Bailey's Horse Feeds Novice over 7 furlongs. It's going to be our first visit to Chelmsford City this year. So we get a slightly different surface, and I suppose, although it's the all-weather, we're obviously slightly different surface, and the transference of form may or may not work out quite as expected. But it should suit some of these horses quite well, probably. But we've got a lot of unexposed horses, a lot of horses making their debuts this Saturday. If we look back to the first maiden that we had at the start of the season, which obviously was run at Wolverhampton, we've got some form there with Wanassa and Nad Al Sheba. Wanassa is in the first colours of Sheikh Hamdan, and Nad Al Sheba is the white cap. Wanassa obviously ran well in that race, but then fell back a little bit to be third, whereas Nad Al Sheba was running on. That race was won by Al Shamik, who has went on and won well next time. So you'd like to think those two would be able to come on from that run.
Yeah, the form got a solid lock to it with what the winner has done subsequently under the penalty. When also, for most of that race, probably looked like the most likely winner. Travelled very strongly into the contest, was probably left in front a little bit too soon. The tail did flash around a little bit, but I think we can forgive that considering it was the horse's first outing. And in the end, she was beaten a length and 3/4, so she wasn't actually beaten that far. So, as I say, the form has got a solid look to it. Nadal Shibaru finished fourth. The penny dropped late on. He ran on quite nicely. I think it was interesting to note that the same rider who rode the horse on that occasion rides again. So it's David Probert, isn't it? He will know the horse that little bit better this time around, and it's had a bit of a break since that maiden. So I do like that as an angle. So it's just had a bit more of a break. I mean, when also we've seen her again subsequently, she was obviously second back at Wolverhampton when one of her stable companions ran her down in the closing stages. Again, she travelled well through that contest, and then there was still a little sign of greenness, I thought, perhaps in the closing stages. Not many of the others well, there's only one of the others that's ran, obviously. Alameen, who was obviously thought good enough to run in the Derby. He's got the highest rating. He comes back down in trip, which I think will help him considering how he went through some of his races over 7 furlongs last year. But I've not been completely convinced about his finishing effort, I must admit. There's a chance he could get loose on the lead, though, because he has led in his races in the past. He did lead at Wolverhampton last time out. Like I say, I think the step down in trip will definitely suit. Chelmsford can often be a front runner's course as well, particularly with the thoroughbreds. We see it happen quite a lot. Different headgear, I think, as well, isn't it, for him? Not different headgear. They've mixed around with his headgear a little bit, haven't they? But yeah, my pin came down on one arse, hopefully to get off the mark at the third attempt. All the others are making their debuts. There's some nice pedigrees in there. One of them, obviously, Al Ghadir's got headgear on for debut, which is never a hugely encouraging sign, I don't think. But obviously, it's some interesting jockey bookings as well. And again, you've seen probably most of these in the flesh, so you know more about them than I do.
I have, Gary. I saw the majority of these around about sort of September time this year when I went up to Newmarket. Al Ghadir actually is a horse that I've seen right through from a foal to now he is at 3 years old. And, he's a nice horse and very well bred. He's by De Hess out of Al Marwa, who is a full sister to Al Mutawakila, who's a Group 1 winner and won the 4-year-old fillies race at the ARH weekend. But more importantly to people who follow the racing, she's a half-sister to Al Mortazez, who of course was by De Hess, and he was a top-rated racehorse, Arabian racehorse in the world, and still no horse has quite pipped him to the highs that he reached at that time. So obviously he's going to be very interesting. Whether he'll be ready first time out, as you say, it's always a bit of a concern when they've got headgear on for the first time, but possibly that's more of a thoroughbred thing. I think with the Arabians, possibly it helps them focus that little bit more, whereas with the thoroughbreds, we tend to think it's a sign of being ungenuine. Well, let's hope that's the case for Al Ghadir. But as you say, some interesting jockey bookings. The debutantes from Phil, we'll just go on to the Sheikh Hamdan ones. Altar, that's by Mahab out of Zulmania. Now, Zulmania won the Group 2, Group 3 it is now, but certainly then the Group 2 juvenile race at DR. She's already produced 3 other winners, Jamail, Al Aziz and Al Kabir, all by different Chadwell stallions. So Mahab certainly can get them a speedy sort. She seemed very straightforward when I saw her. Interesting that Josie Gordon gets a ride there. It would be her first outing, I believe, on an Arabian. I think she might suit them quite well, so that's quite interesting. He's also got Balkis. She's the first foal out of Najla, by, of course, their champion stallion Majani. Now, Najla was a very close runner-up in the UK Arabian Derby back a few years ago when it was run at Newmarket. Which is a horse that I know they thought quite a lot of at the time. So it's certainly going to be interesting to see her run. I've seen her out at Phil's on the Heath, and she certainly looks well forward. So it'll be interesting to see how she goes. He's also got a Carla Firefly. That's for Nikki Thorne. That's by her stallion Tidebret, who obviously you'll remember winning and being actually quite a good improving horse a few years ago now. He was certainly good over a mile and was placed at group level over this distance. He's obviously had few opportunities as a stallion. I think his first winner was actually Billy's Girl, who won over 6 furlongs here, obviously at a much lower grade. But it'll be interesting to see how he goes. I know that Phil broke him in last year, and then he went back to the Thorns for the bit of a time over the summer, and obviously they've taken the opportunity to come back in as our season's been extended now. And a little word about the dam mare, Cleopatra. She raced in America. Incredibly tough mare. She ran about nearly 40 times, I think, and she was placed. She won 4 times in America. So she's certainly it's certainly a pedigree to be suited by the surface. But whether he'll be quite as sharp as maybe some of the others remains to be seen. I don't know. And of course, the one horse I haven't mentioned there is Bigor. He's been trained by Peter Hammersley. He's a new recruit to Pete's yard. Not one I've seen, it has to be said. He's come from France. His dam was unplaced. But the sire, he comes from a second crop of the full-time Group 1 winner Nishan, who got a flying start with his early runners in France with a horse called Hadi de Carrère, who's a 2-time Group 1 winner as a 3-year-old this year. So, and some of his other horses have been catching the eye. So it'll be interesting to see the first of that horse's progeny run over here in the UK, and also because Pete's obviously just hit form without Abari winning last week.
Yeah, very much so. So, like I say, with you summed that up quite nicely. There were quite a few of those newcomers. They're all interesting. 1 or 2 of them, for different reasons. A paddock check, which you'll be able to get, is probably going to be essential, isn't it? So it'll be interesting to see, how tuned up some of them are. You'd have thought this time of the year that at this stage of the season, quite a few of them, they should be ready to go. And I suppose it's a question of potentially maybe who handles the surface best as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Gary. And of course, it's a very open race, and as we know, with so many debutants in the race, I wouldn't say anything could happen, but there's the potential for maybe something to really take to it straight away, or it could turn into a slightly more difficult race. We'll just have to see.
Yeah, like I said, looking forward to it. It's got a nice shape to it with, as we said before, a little bit of form in there with 3 of them having run, and obviously, 5 of them making their race course debuts for some, for various reasons. All of those newcomers make some sort of appeal as well.
Absolutely, Gary. And we'll be back at Wolverhampton for the Racing to School 0 to 60 handicap. That'll be run on Monday, the 16th of November. So we'll have a week's break. And what have you been covering recently, Gary? You're obviously at the studios at William Hill today.
Yeah, I'm in the studio today. It's a whole mixture today. Lots going on. Day off tomorrow and Saturday, and I'll be doing some German commentaries from home on Sunday. Quite an early start, actually. I think so. 7 or 8 races. I think it's the last turf meeting of the season in Germany. So yeah, I'll be covering that. It goes out all over. I'm not entirely sure where it actually goes, but I'll be doing the commentaries for those.
Super. Okay, well, we look forward to our race on Saturday, and we'll catch up again towards the end of next week. Thank you, Gary.
Look forward to it.
Thank you.